So Bellator 288 is coming up this weekend and We Want Picks are here to give you guys some predictions. I am Artem MMA Analysis. I have done Dana White's Contender Series predictions on the We Want Picks channel in the past, and I will be covering Bellator and the PFL finals later on this year, so I'm very much looking forward to that. But as for a Bellator card, this is a pretty stacked one. You've got two massive title fights at the top and something like 10 or 11 undefeated fighters on the card. Bellator's really put their recruiting hats on and got some really good guys making their Bellator debuts, such as Kasan Askabov and Timur Khizriev, two guys I'm very much looking forward to. Some massive title fights at the top of the card, but I don't want to waste too much time. Let's just get straight into the picks. There is a few prelim fights that are, like not very experienced fighters, so I'm going to rush straight through them, but we're really going to delve deep into some very high level fights higher up on the card. I'm looking forward to it. Hopefully you guys enjoy the extra content on the We Want Picks channel, and looking forward to the card. Let's just get straight into it. So the first fight of the night is a pretty low-level heavyweight fight. You've got Wladimir Guiva making his professional and amateur debut. Technically, he's never fought in MMA before, taking on Corey Mogenberg. And I am going to be picking Guiva to win by submission here. I did a little bit of research on this guy, and I found that he's actually a very good grappler. He was in the 2018 World IBJJF Jiu-Jitsu No-Gi Championships, and he actually ended up getting second place in the male brown belt ultra heavyweight division. That was in 2018, so potentially he has become a black belt in jiu-jitsu, but that is a very good win, I guess, to have on his grappling record there. He managed to get second place in a massive jiu-jitsu tournament. Now, Corey Mogenberg, on paper, this guy is a 2-4 heavyweight, which is a little bit sketchy, but this guy actually had a really nice amateur record. This guy went 9-1 as an amateur with a couple of nice submission wins himself, and then he made his debut against Brendan Allen, lost by KO in the first round, didn't fight for a couple of years, and then he won. And then he lost a few fights, and then he won again, and the guys that he's losing to are actually pretty good. I mean, Logan Woods is actually quite a decent prospect. He was meant to fight in the Kasanganai at some point, who was in the UFC. Thomas Peterson's building a very nice name for himself over at LFA as well. Corey Mogenberg's definitely not like the worst 2-4 fighter. You've seen this guy has lost to some great guys, but I really do think that if Guiva can get the fight to the mat, maybe he can use that jiu-jitsu. It does say that he has been training out of the American Kickboxing Academy, and they have produced some very good prospects, as you may know. And I think that Guiva should be able to get this one done. I feel like if he can get it to the mat, he should be able to find a submission. On the feet, it could be very interesting because Mogenberg is just a much more experienced MMA fighter. He does have a pretty decent amateur background, but I'm going to go with Guiva by submission. Not a fight which I would recommend putting your money on, just considering it's two guys, that don't have much professional experience, especially Guiva. He's never fought in MMA before, so I can't really tell you what he's going to look like in an MMA fight. Very interesting that a lot of people picking Guiva to win by KO. I think submission's so much more likely just due to his background, but it'll be very interesting to see what happens. Mogenberg has lost by KO quite a few times in his career, so I guess it makes sense. We'll move on to the next one. And now we move on to the second fight of the night, and another fight I really don't recommend that you place your money on. I am going to be going with Isaiah Hokit here. He is a 1-1 fighter in Bellator. Both of his professional fights took place in Bellator. He got knocked out in his first fight, come back, and then he beat another guy in his second fight 8 months ago. He's fighting an undefeated Matthias Nadir, and in my opinion, Hokit is going to be a much bigger fighter in this fight here. Nadir, he has actually fought at 145 in the past. I believe his debut was at 145, and then he fought at 145 pounds again, and then he was meant to fight Rob Fency at 135 pounds, and both of them missed weight, so it was made a catch weight, and that's why he did last weigh in at 136.5, and now he's moved back up to 145 to take on Isaiah Hokit, and as I said, Isaiah Hokit is going to be the much bigger fighter. He does have a wrestling background, as you might pick up from this profile picture here, and you can actually read up about it on a website called GoBulldogs.com, and he did have a somewhat successful winning record against some pretty decent wrestlers, it seems like. I read up about it. I'm going to be picking Hokit here. Matthias Nadir, from what I saw on the feet, I don't like it at all. This guy's getting hit by strikes, which he shouldn't be getting hit by. I mean, when he fought Felipe Martinez-Doniz, this guy ran straight forward, threw up a flying knee, threw up a couple of punches, and Nadir kind of just ate them all, and it's a little bit scary then. I think that Hokit's going to at least survive the first round against Nadir because he does have pretty good jiu-jitsu. All 3 of his wins are by submission. Actually, I lied to you, sorry. 2 of his most recent wins are by submission, but I think Hokit's going to be able to grind out a decision, or he's going to get some sort of late TKO. I'm going to be picking Hokit in this one here. It's not a confident pick. It's 2 guys that have got 3 and 2 professional fights respectively. A little bit scary, but I think that Hokit should be able to get it done here. In the next fight, you've got Laed Anderson taking on Ron Fennekel, and I believe that Laed Anderson is going to win this one by submission. He's a very young guy. He has fought 2 times in 4 years, which is a little bit of a red flag, but he is looking pretty good, and there is a very good reason for that lack of MMA fights in that period of time, and it is actually because he was competing in the Combat Jiu-Jitsu Worlds in 2021. He lost his first belt there, and then he won a couple and lost again, but the point is he's getting there, he's beating some of the highest level grapplers in the world, and he's looking pretty good doing it, and he took on JT Donaldson, submitted him in the first round. Now he's taken a very slight step up in competition, in my opinion, taking on Rob Fennekel. Rob Fennekel, he's okay, but I don't think he's going to be the level of Laed Anderson on the ground for sure, so I'm going to be picking Laed to get the fight to the ground and get a submission. Fennekel does have a lot more MMA experience though. He had a 3-2 amateur record, 2-2 pro record, and Laed Anderson had a 3-0 amateur record with a 2-0 pro record here. But I think Laed should get it done. As I said, he's fought twice in 4 years, but that really is because he has been competing in grappling. Now it looks like he's going to be focusing a little bit more on MMA now that he's a little bit older, 24 years old. Very bright prospect, undefeated as well. Many people on Tapology picking to win by submission, and I do have to agree, so I'm going to be going with Anderson in this one here. If my mouse would work. And another fight on the prelims where there's a massive favourite that I'm going to be picking. I'm going to be going with Jordan Newman in this one here. He's got a very good wrestling background here. If you look actually online, you can find it. He's a 2-time NCAA D3 national champion. He's a Division 3 Wrestler of the Year and WIAC Wrestler of the Year as well. Pretty decent wrestler, and he's also got a win over Joseph Holmes as well, who you may recognise, who is currently signed to the UFC right now. He recently lost to Yoon Young Park, but looked pretty good in the first round, and that was actually Joseph Holmes' first ever fight, and he was at the time a 7-0 amateur making his debut in Bellator, and he lost to Jordan Newman, who was only 1-0 at the time. Jordan Newman used his wrestling, won the fight, and obviously Bellator have picked him up since then, giving him slightly better competition over time. I think that he's going to be able to beat Jaden Talker here. Jaden Talker, he's competing in boxing, he's competing in grappling, he's not winning. And I think that Jordan Newman is winning. So I'm going to be picking Jordan Newman to win this one here. Inside the distance at some point, I think he's going to take down Talkner and wear him down with some ground and pound and finish him off with ground and pound or a submission, something like that. So I'm going to be going with Newman to win this one here. And this fight here at 205 pounds is a very good one. You've got Sullivan Cooley taking on Jay Raddick, and the reason why this is such a good fight is all 4 of Sullivan Cooley's wins are in the first round. All 3 of Jay Raddick's professional wins are in the first round, but Sullivan Cooley, the much younger fighter here, Jay Raddick almost 39 years old, and Sullivan Cooley also does have a couple of decent wins on his record. He's got a win over very experienced Tyson Jeffries by KO in the first round, and he also knocked out Ben Parrish in the first round as well. If you don't know who Ben Parrish is actually the guy that beat Christian Edwards and took the O off Christian Edwards, who is a guy that Bellator were trying to build up. They gave Ben Parrish thinking that Ben Parrish was going to lose, and Ben Parrish knocked him out in 38 seconds. Pretty decent win there. Jay Raddick, as I said, he is 39 years old. He is pretty old, and he hasn't fought for 3 years, which is a pretty decent red flag here. He did have an amateur record as well, but that spanned all the way back to 2013 and 2012. Maybe Jay Raddick is fighting as kind of like a hobby or something like that with all of these time periods differences. You guys know what I mean. I'm picking Sullivan Cooley to win by KO in the first round. He might even take down Jay Raddick and finish him off there. Jay Raddick is dangerous, but I think that Sullivan Cooley is just more dangerous and is the younger, more up-and-coming guy, the guy that Bellator is trying to build up, so I'm going to be going with Cooley by first round finish, most likely by KO. That is how he's gotten all of his wins, by the way. First round knockout, not just first round finish, first round knockout, so give me Cooley to win this one. And the next matchup on the prelims is going to be Lucas Brennan taking on Nick Talavera, and I'm going to be picking Lucas Brennan to win here once again as a massive favourite, and I'm going to pick him to win by submission. Nick Talavera, he's got a pretty nice 5-1 record, but the guys that he's beating are not the same level as the guys that Lucas Brennan is beating himself. So if you look at Nick Talavera, he's got a win over a guy that was 1-1 3 weeks ago, and then two months ago he fought a guy that was 1-0. 7-12, 0-0, and he lost to a guy making his debut earlier on in his career. But if you look at Talavera's record as well, he's actually got 3 losses as an amateur by submission. He's got a couple of submission wins himself, so maybe a kill or be killed grappler there. But I'm going to be picking Lucas Brennan here to get the submission. This guy is submitting some pretty decent fighters. You know, he is kind of being built up by Bellator, being given a slightly harder competition over time. You know, he debuted against a few guys with losing records, and then he's been built up over time. He's even got a win over Jaden Smith's father as well, which is kind of crazy. One of the most powerful slaps in Hollywood, and he managed to ground and pound him out in the second round. So good for Lucas Brennan there. Very good win on their record. I think that he should be able to beat Nick Talavera there. I do like guys that fight often, which is Talavera, but I think that Lucas Brennan is the guy that Bellator's trying to build up, and I feel like I'm going to see him win by submission in this matchup here. So yeah, give me Brennan by submission here. And we have another fight on the prelims where Bellator is obviously trying to build up a fighter, and the fighter that they're trying to build up is Archie Colgan. He's fought for Bellator quite a few times, once again over increasingly levels of competition, and this is actually only his 3rd fight in Bellator, but he's won Eagle FC in the past as well over Dylan Mantello, and he beat Brian Neuro as well and Ben Simmons. Jesse Hanam, he hasn't fought for a year and a half, a 2-1 record, so he's a little bit less experienced as a professional, but he does actually have a pretty big amateur record of 6-5, which is okay. I mean, it was experience after all. Archie Colgan went undefeated as an amateur. He went 3-0, and now he's gone 5-0 as a professional. It kind of just comes down to the fact that I think that Bellator are trying to build up Archie Colgan with a win over Jesse Hanam here. So I am going to be going with Archie Colgan. I actually do remember watching his fight against Dylan Mantello, and he looked really good on the feet, and he was able to mix it up a little bit as well. Mantello's, in my opinion, is actually a very good fighter himself, but Archie Colgan managed to win a decision over him, and he also knocked out Brian Neuro, who was a much more experienced fighter at the time. At the time, Colgan was 4-0. Neuro had 12 professional fights, so I think this is a very winnable fight for Colgan. I'm expecting him to get it done. If he's able to finish someone like Brian Neuro, I think he should be able to finish Jesse Hanam. So give me Colgan just to win inside the distance, likely by KO, maybe in the first couple of rounds. But once again, just a fight I wouldn't put my money on. I mean, once again, it just comes down to 2 guys being somewhat inexperienced, and Jesse Hanam not fighting for a year and a half. This guy could come out and look like a completely different fighter, but I'm not trusting that. I do think Colgan should get it done and look pretty good doing it as well. Now, this next fight here, Jalon Bates versus Jornal Lugo, in my opinion, is very underrated. Jalon Bates is undefeated 6-0 as a professional, but he's also very underrated as an amateur as well. This guy went 9-0 as an amateur, so in total, he is 15-0 altogether, and I'm going to be picking the O to go. I'm going to be going with Jornal Lugo to win this one here. He's just fought the much higher levels of competition. You know, he beat Brian Moore. He submitted Keith Lee, who was actually Kevin Lee's younger brother. I'm 99% sure that's true. And other than that, he has been beating some undefeated guys. You know, he fought 4-0 Slyther Shutho earlier in his career, 4-0 Kutavius Romeus earlier on in his career as well. And then, even then as an amateur as well, he was fighting somewhat decent competition against Ryan Kusei, who is a pretty good prospect himself. And Jalon Bates, you know, his last fight, I don't know what necessarily happened against Mark Coates, but he didn't look amazing, and it was a somewhat big step up in competition because Mark Coates, he did have some pretty good wins and even losses on his record as well. He had fought good competition himself. And Mark Coates made it close with him. I do think Jalon Bates did win the fight, but it was competitive. And maybe there's an argument there. I mean, one judge thought so anyway. But I'm going to be picking Jornal Lugo to win this one here. His one loss as a professional is to Danny Sabatello. And if you don't know who Danny Sabatello is, he's not a very exciting fighter whatsoever. But he makes up with it for it with his brash attitude and his words, and he's actually a pretty big star for Bellator. At least he's trying to be a big star for Bellator, because to be fair, Bellator's not the best at promoting their fighters, especially compared to UFC. Like UFC in New Zealand, I live in a place where there's only like 300,000 people living there, and they put up billboards for every pay-per-view in the city, you know, and they probably do that worldwide. And Bellator, you never hear anything of it, even online as well. So Yeah, Jenny Sabatello, he's a guy that's trying to build his name while being signed under Bellator. He's actually not picked to be in the UFC because he won his Dana White's Contender Series fight. That was totally unrelated to this fight. But I thought I'd just throw that out there. I'm going to be picking Jornal Lugo here. I think the level of competition is just so important because one thing that you do see with these fighters that have been built up against lower level competition, and they actually show that lack of experience against decent competition. I feel like a good example was actually Dan Hooker versus Claudio Puelles. Claudio Puelles has built up his record against not the best levels of competition, and Dan Hooker's losses really have been only to the best recently, and he just showed a very just more experience against decent competition, and you kind of see that Dana White's Contender Series as well if you follow that closely. I'm picking Jornal Lugo, just much higher levels of competition. And I think that experience against someone like Danny Sabatello, who's actually going to be fighting for the title, is going to pay dividends here. So I'm picking Jornal Lugo to win by decision here. I'm not fooled by the undefeated record, but if Jalon Bates does beat Jornal Lugo, he is a 100% a prospect to follow. But for now, I've got to go with Lugo. So the next fight is going to be on the prelims, and it's Killis Motta taking on Yairo Pacheco. And I'm going to be honest, I'm really nervous about this fight because I actually went into this fight really trying to find a reason to pick the underdog in this one here. 7-0, 25 years old, somewhat decent levels of competition as well when he's taking on Killis Motta, who's actually a very decent fighter in Bellator. I know he is 2-3 with the promotion. But, sorry, he's a 2-2 with the promotion. But Killis Motta is a good fighter, and he does have some really good wins on his record as an amateur. But I'm going to be going with Killis Motta in this one here. I wanted to pick Yairo Pacheco, as I said. I was really trying to look into it and try and find a reason to pick the prospect. But I think Pacheco, this is a big step up in competition here. He was having troubles with Raul Bernardo before he did manage to finish off the fight. He was the much better much better striker than Bernardo. But Bernardo was able to clinch him up, pressure him, and take him down. And Pacheco didn't really seem to have too much when he was put on his back and against the clinch. And Killis Motta might not bring that game plan to this fight, but if he does, I can see him winning very easily just based off of that. Killis Motta is a pretty decent striker himself. He's a little bit more experienced against better levels of competition as well. I like Motta. Not super confident. I'm not going to pretend like I'm super confident here, but I am going to pick Motta. He is the favourite on the betting odds, but he's the underdog on Tapology. 22% picking Motta. I think a lot of people are seeing that 7-0 record and picking Pacheco for that reason, but I'm going to go with the Bellator veteran and Motta in this fight here. Man, I could not say anyone's name in that last 2 minutes. And now we've got Imam Shafi Aliyev taking on Sean Connor Fallon, and I'm going to be picking Imam Shafi here, and I think that he's going to get it done by decision or maybe like a ground and pound TKO. Aliyev, to be brutally honest, he kind of does fight like you would expect him to, but he's a very young prospect. He's actually from Dagestan as well and does kind of fight with that Dagestan wrestling base, grinding up against the cage, always looking and pressuring for that rear naked choke, taking you down, letting you back up, taking you down again, or even just taking you down and controlling you for the whole round, like some of the other prospects do as well. And I think that Sean Connor Fallon, although he is so experienced, the guys that he's fighting aren't the best in the world. You know, he's 4-1 in his last 5 fights. But he's beating a guy that's 5-4, 6-2, 10-9. Brandon Bell, actually, who fought in Bellator, by the way. That was a crazy, weird fight. Ruben Ware, who's 12-10. And his split decision loss to Adam Asenza, who was on The Ultimate Fighter season 25, I believe. The season that Calvin Gastelum won anyway. The John Jones versus Charles Sonnen season, Adam Asenza was on that. If you wanted a little bit of lore there. So, yeah, I'm going to be going with Aliyev here by ground and pound TKO or a decision. And it should be a pretty good one here. And I see what Bellator's doing, because you're going to notice a little bit of a trend here. A lot of guys making their debut from that sort of region, you know, Aliyev 8-0, Tamir Kizriev as well, and Usman Nurmagomedov is fighting for the title. So it's going to be an interesting one. I'm going with Aliyev. I think he should be able to get it done by decision here. And I can see what Bellator's trying to do. You know, they've recruited quite a few of these kind of guys. Tamir Kizriev as well as another undefeated guy, taking a pretty big step up in competition against Daniel Weichel. But we'll get to that later. Let's just move straight on. Picking Aliyev decision for the 5th time. I think I've said that. Now, one thing you can appreciate Bellator for is the amount of fights that they put on, because I believe we're up to the 11th fight on the card and we're still on the prelims. And the main card starts after this, so 11 fight prelims. I've got to respect Bellator for that. You're getting a lot of fights out of them, and it's going to be Otto Rodriguez taking on Kasan Askarbov, two guys with really nice records. But they're a little bit sketchy. Like, they're both a little bit sketchy. You look at the last fights for Otto Rodriguez. He last beat a guy that was 19-2 a year ago, which is an amazing win to have on your record. But that was his first fight in 4 years. And for Kasan Askarbov as well, this guy's not the most active fighter in the world. In fact, I feel like if this guy was more active, he would have been picked up by the UFC. But the last time he fought was 2 years ago, and it was a win over a guy with a losing 12-13 record by submission. He lost to Ellis Alima, who's 20-7. And before that, yes, he's got an 11-1 win there, but a lot of these guys that he's beaten are not the best levels of competition, and he's super inactive as of recent. I'm not too sure why that's been. He's only fought 5 times in the last 5.5 years. Otto Rodriguez has fought 5 times in the last 7 years. Like, what are these two doing? I don't quite understand, you know? So, it's such a weird fight, but I'm gonna be going to Kasan Askarbov. I'm not that confident in it. I believe I picked every favourite on the card so far, so I do apologise. I picked a few Bellator underdogs last week. One of them I got completely wrong, and one of them I got correct actually, but I'm gonna be going with Kasan Askarbov here. He is training under the American top team. I know that he has made a few changes in his career, and there was like some rumours going around that maybe Kasan Askarbov was going to get signed to the UFC, but it never really ended up happening. He got signed to Bellator instead, and it's just sketchy. Like, the guys that he's fighting, he was 15-0 when he fought 22-14 Hermes Franca, and he lost, you know, and then he's just, it's sketchy. It's so sketchy, and the same sort of thing goes for Otto Rodriguez. You could argue Otto Rodriguez has fought better competition, but he just, once again, they're not fighting often, and it's scary. So I'm going to be going with Askarbov. He does have good wins in his career, but it's sprinkled in with a lot of wins that are just built to pad up their record, so I'm not confident. I'm not going to pretend like I am. It's a weird fight. I'm going to Askarbov decision here. Maybe Rodriguez could make something happen and surprise me. I wouldn't be that surprised. But I'm going to be going with Askarbov, and let's just move on, because this is a scary fight. It's difficult, man. It really is. And this matchup here, Feraldo versus Chikali, is going to be a banger of a fight. I cannot state this enough. This is going to be such a good fight. Roman Feraldo, 8 wins. 8 wins by knockout. Levan Chikali, 10 wins. 9 wins by knockout. And both guys fighting pretty decent level of competition along the way as well. Feraldo has been picked up by Bellator a few years ago, and since then, he's just been a KO machine. First round finishes galore, and he's really making a pretty fun name for himself, and he also went undefeated as an amateur as well, which you love to see. Levan Chikali, similar sort of situation. This guy didn't really have an amateur record. He won, and then he just went straight into a pro and went on a rampage. He went on a 8-fight first round finish streak with so many sub 1 minute wins in there as well, albeit not necessarily against the best competition, but there's so many first round KO wins. He got signed to Bellator off of a bunch of random awesome wins again, and then he lost to Cole Crutchmer by decision and got submitted by one of my favourite fighters, Goiti Yamauchi. And now he takes on Roman Feraldo in what's going to be a very good stand-up fight, a fight I cannot wait to watch. It's going to be awesome. I mean, I'm excited. You guys can hear that I'm excited. I'm picking Feraldo though by KO. I mean, if Chikali knocks out Feraldo, I wouldn't be that surprised, but I like Feraldo in this matchup here. I think he's just a little bit more of the wild striker of the two, and I think that's going to pay him dividends here, and I think he's going to land something on Chikali. Chikali, I know he's got crazy KOs himself. It's just a great fight. It's just a great fight. It really is. I'm going Feraldo by KO. Chikali, people picking Chikali are mainly picking him to win by decision. That's weird. That's really weird. It's either Chikali KO or Feraldo KO on paper. Maybe something crazy happens and they end up winning a decision, but from what I'm seeing on paper, this fight should really not go to the distance in the way that they fight as well. It's very exciting. It's somewhat high risk to get a KO, and Feraldo, I feel like, is going to be the one to capitalize on that sort of style of fight. So I'm going to give Feraldo the win by KO as my prediction. In this next fight, you've got a heavyweight bout between Tyrell Fortune and Daniel James, and I'm going to be going with Tyrell Fortune in this one here. This guy has been built up by Bellator, and he once again has a very nice wrestling background, which Bellator does like to build their prospects up off of. And Tyrell Fortune, to be fair, he wasn't fighting the best levels of competition in Bellator. You know, he went on a pretty nice win streak, and he did beat a couple of good guys. Went on another win streak as well, beat Matt Mitrione there, who had a very bad Bellator run, and he beat Raheem Cleveland. This guy likes to use wrestling and get ground and pound, but he's also pretty dangerous on the feet as well, and he does get KOs. And Daniel James, kind of a somewhat similar style. He missed weight in his last fight. I'm actually interested to know if that was at 265 pounds or not, but a similar style, the way that he fights. He has fought it over at ACA, fighting some pretty decent competition there, but I am going to say James has fought good competition. He's potentially a good underdog for that reason. Like, the guys that he's fighting, Rafael Pessoa is a guy you might recognize as you go down. Ruslan Magomedov's a pretty decent prospect himself. Brett Martin, I believe, is actually a pretty good prospect. I think he's on the verge of maybe being signed to the UFC if he can get a win on Dana White's Contender Series. This guy's got weird wins. Like, he's got some very weird illegal wins, but that's not the point. So that's how he beat Daniel James. I got distracted for a second, but yeah, Tyrell Fortune is going to win in my opinion here. I think he's going to lean on the wrestling a little bit, lean on the power punching. Daniel James is a massive dude with a reach advantage, with a height advantage, but he's almost 41 years old. I think Tyrell Fortune should be able to get the victory in this one here, inside the distance, ground and pound KO, or just KO on the feet in general. It should be exciting though for as long as it lasts. I don't think it's going to last too long, but I think it's going to be fun. So I'm picking Fortune in this one here. And now on the next one here, we're on the main card now. Daniel White Chow taking on Tamir Khizriev, and I'm going to be going with Tamir Khizriev, but I don't like the odds. I feel like he's taxed a little bit here. Minus 280 is a bit wide. It's his Bellator debut. He's taking on 55-fight veteran Daniel White Chow, a guy that has been in the Bellator scene for a while, and Khizriev, you know, making his Bellator debut, undefeated guy, taking on Daniel White Chow, who at this point is an older guy with so much experience, with some great wins on his record. Don Shishira, who was 21-1 at the time, he lost a split decision to Goiti Yamuchi, who was one of my favourite fighters. A split decision loss to Patricio Pitbull as well. Split decision win over Keone Diggs. Robert Whiteford, who was an older guy at the time. Diggs was an older guy at the time as well. Georgi Karakanyan's a pretty decent win. And Georgi Karakanyan has gone on to have a very nice veteran career. And I don't know, man. I feel like maybe this will be frowned upon, but I am picking the guy making his Bellator debut in Tamir Khizriev, who's only 27 years old, but this guy does have a style to beat Daniel White Chow, in my opinion. He does have strong grappling, and he does have good cardio, and he also does have a decent finishing ability. I mean, we're looking at Khizriev's record here, and he is fighting good competition himself, and most notably, I will point out the Babert Tumanov win is very good. Babert Tumanov is now a 12-2 prospect. He has lost since then, but Babert Tumanov is a guy with some very good wins in his career. He does have a lot of decision wins, but he does have a finishing ability with the chokes. He does kind of fight and grind up against the cage and does always look for the choke. He takes you down, you try and get up, you expose your neck. Tamir Khizriev's definitely going to be trying to grab onto that. I understand the White Chow pick completely. In fact, I'm almost tempted to pick White Chow just based on experience alone, higher level competition as well, and potentially a style that can beat Khizriev. But I think Khizriev is going to stick to a game plan here. I think he's going to work White Chow to a decision here. So I'm going to be going Khizriev decision. It's not a pick I'm that comfortable making. I don't really feel that good about it either. So I think to stay away, especially because the line, in my opinion, is a little bit too wide, especially on that Khizriev side. So give me Khizriev. Not that confident in it, but maybe he just comes out here and looks amazing and people will be saying that he's a future Bellator champion. We don't know. That does kind of happen with these guys, so let's see. And now we've got Patricky Pitbull defending his belt against Usman Nurmagomedov, and for a variety of reasons, this is just a weird title fight. The first reason is Usman Nurmagomedov has no ranked wins at all in Bellator, and the second reason is Patricky Pitbull kind of is the champion because his brother vacated the belt. Patricky Pitbull's brother Patricio was the champion. He vacated the belt. Patricky Pitbull fought for the vacant belt against Peter Queally in a rematch, and he won the belt, and now he's going to be defending it against Usman Nurmagomedov, who does have a very nice style to beat Patricky Pitbull, in my opinion here. The Pitbull brothers, they're always very exciting fighters to watch. They're always quite aggressive, but I think that Usman Nurmagomedov should be able to tone that down and get the win in this matchup here. He gets a lot of finishes. He gets a lot of finishes in Bellator. You know, he's getting first round finishes over guys that once again aren't ranked in Bellator. But it is what it is. Like, he's getting a lot of finishes, a lot more finishes than I would say his counterparts have done, and I'm actually expecting him to finish Patricio Pitbull in this matchup here. Not in the first round though. I'm gonna say he wears him down over the first 2 rounds and ends up getting a 3rd or 4th round finish by rear naked choke up against the cage. He's grinding up on Pitbull. Pitbull has to get up. He gives up his back. Usman Nurmagomedov jumps on the back and ends up getting a rear naked choke and becomes the Bellator champion. And Nurmagomedov, he's looked dominant against non-ranked opponents, but I feel like he still has looked dominant enough to beat someone like Patricio Pitbull here, who has lost in the past to fighters, in my opinion, that aren't as good as Usman. So I'm going with Usman here by submission. So is the majority, and I'm really looking forward to the main event. It's going to be a very good fight. And now in this main event, you've got Vadim Nemkov taking on Corey Anderson, and I'm going to be going with Corey Anderson in this matchup here. The first time the fight rolled around on my YouTube channel, I actually picked Vadim Nemkov to win the fight, and now that I've seen them fight before, Corey Anderson knows what he can do to Vadim, and I'm expecting him to do it to him. So I'm going to be picking Corey Anderson to win this one here. If you haven't seen the first fight, I do recommend you watch it so you can kind of know what to expect. But in that first fight, Corey Anderson took Vadim Nemkov down somewhat easily, and then when he got Nemkov to the ground, he was able to control him, and he landed some nasty ground and pound. And actually, in the process of landing some nasty ground and pound, he threw like a punch downwards, or maybe it was an elbow, one of the two, and his head actually clashed onto Nemkov's head as he threw it down. It was a weird situation, and they ended up stopping the fight because of it. I feel like Nemkov saved his belt that day, and now Corey Anderson's going to be fighting him for it now. And I think actually it's for the vacant belt, is it? No, I think it is for the belt. Anyway, apologies for that, but I think that Corey Anderson should win this one here. We've seen a pathway to beat Vadim Nemkov carved out by Corey Anderson himself, and he was very successful in doing that. I think he's going to do it again. I think he's going to take down Vadim Nemkov. He's going to ground and pound him, and I think he's actually going to end up finishing Vadim Nemkov on the ground with ground and pounds in the 2nd or the 3rd round. I'm expecting it to happen sometime early, man. I'm excited for this fight though. Nemkov, dangerous guy, very good wins himself. He submitted Julius Anglicus, who's definitely not a joke at all. He beat Phil Davis, who's a decent fighter himself. Ryan Bader as well, he knocked him out. But Ryan Bader is not the same fighter at 205 as he is at 265. He does have a win over Rafael Carvalho himself. Corey Anderson, in my opinion, he's going to take down Nemkov. He's going to stay safe on top. He's going to play it smart, and he's going to land ground and pound at that smart ground and pound. That's not going to get him caught on a submission or anything like that. And I think we're going to see Anderson win by TKO in the 2nd or 3rd round, as I said, because Corey Anderson was on his way to potentially getting a TKO win against Vadim Nemkov. He had him cut up. He had him on the ground. Nemkov didn't really have too much for him once Anderson got on top. So I'm going to just trust that that's going to happen again. I could look stupid. I picked Nemkov the first time for a reason, but I'm going to be picking Corey Anderson in this one here. He recently did beat Ryan Bader by KO himself. He beat Dovletsan Yagshimorodov, who's a decent fighter himself as well. Melvin Manhoof by KO, but I guess that was almost expected. So yeah, give me Anderson. He could make me look silly, but I think he should be able to beat Nemkov and become the the Bellator light heavyweight champion. And you know what he's going to say? He's going to say he's the best in the world. And Jan Blachowicz is going to say something about that. It's just going to be a somewhat funny situation. But yeah, I'm going to be picking Corey Anderson to win. Let me know what you thought about the video. Hopefully you enjoyed it. I'm going to be making this sort of overlay a little bit more professional. I've got something ordered. It's going to look nicer. Hopefully you enjoyed the video. Hopefully you don't mind me being on the We Want Picks YouTube channel, because I am here to cover Bellator and PFL in a couple of weeks as well. So you'll probably see me sometime soon. Hopefully you enjoyed the video. Hopefully you got a bit of information out of the Bellator card. I think it's going to be a good one, man. There's some very high-level fights on the card, and also there's just a lot of fights on the card. There's 16 fights. It's going to be awesome. Can't wait for it. And I'll see you in the next one. Thank you very much.